Hi everybody, my name is Angeliki Chamchougia, and in this study we shall evaluate the benefits from teaching linear equations for students with specific learning difficulties. To investigate this issue, we begin by taking a closer look at who are students with specific learning difficulties. Children with specific learning difficulties form an extremely heterogeneous group of children, with the main feature being the disagreement in the development of individual abilities. The extent and intensity of the characteristics associated with specific learning difficulties in the acquisition and the production of spoken language, reading, writing, reasoning, and mathematics are predictive factors for their diagnosis. In generally agreed today that the dominant characteristics of students with specific learning difficulties are problems in the understanding and production of oral speech, problems with the phonemic awareness and phonological processing and memory or recall of some oral information have been shown to affect accurate decoding and fluency. Problems in reading and writing. Students show weaknesses in basic cognitive skills of perception, memory, visual and or auditory, language and phonological awareness. Reasoning problems, that means weaknesses in executive functional skills, the use of cognitive learning strategies, and self-regulatory skills. Problems in mathematics. A large number of students with specific learning difficulties face severe problems in performing arithmetic operations, in the concept of number, in the use of strategies, and in the interpretation of graphs. Apart from the above, the existence of specific learning difficulties affects the life of a student in a variety of sectors, which could be highlighted as follows. Cognitive sector. The student may present problems of sensory, visually and or auditory perception and processing, language development problems, memory problems, problems concerning the ability to pay attention and focus on a subject, difficulties in spatio-temporal concepts and in spatial orientation, problems in kinetic development and general coordination of his movements, difficulties in cognitive motivation or sluggishness, self-regulation problems, metacognitive problems, that is problems in identifying the demands for designing and completing a project, in choosing and applying the appropriate solutions and strategies, in monitoring and performance adjustment and in evaluation of the results. Socio-emotional sector. The students with specific learning difficulties are low motivated to have a good school performance, since their main interest seems to be to avoid a total school failure that could bring disapproval from teachers and classmates. On the other hand, children with specific learning difficulties, in addition to the difficulties and deficits they may have in one or more areas, often show more potential and increased skills in other areas. We can meet children who, while having difficulty with basic skills such as reading and writing, respond adequately to other areas as visual or perceptual skills. Children with specific learning difficulties may use alternative ways of learning and be distinguished for their analytical and creative thinking, creative writing, and imagination. These children may also be particularly proficient in sports, crafts, drawing, 3D construction, and the use of technology and multimedia. Sometimes they display other characteristics that are considered typical of gifted children, such as high language skills, high perceptual ability, autonomy, and effective nonverbal communication. Among the characteristics attributed to them are that they learn in a paradoxical way, as well as that the more difficult is the work required of them, the better they do it. Against this background, the central question that motivates this study is: what are the benefits from the teaching of linear equations for students with specific learning difficulties? The key factor behind the teaching of linear equations is hidden in the term representation. That term refers to the representation of one entity by another through some kind of mapping. The student's interaction with an appropriate representation helps him to reach a deeper understanding of the matter under consideration. Teaching with the use of representation and the benefit or not from it is the result of the coexistence of many different parameters, such as the design, the pedagogical functions containing in the representation, as well as the cognitive tool that the student uses to interact with the representations. It is important to be clear about the concept of representation, which includes the following stages: the idea that is represented, the figure used for the representation, the specific aspects of the idea that are included in the figure, the correspondence between the idea and the figure. The issues of representation and visualization of mathematical concepts are referred to in the literature as fundamental, with the researchers increasingly agreeing on their positive effects for the students on the development of comprehension, communication, mathematical reasoning, and problem solving. There are two types of representations, which are the internal mental and the external graphic. The term internal representation refers to mental formations built by students. The students, in his or her own way, and always based on his own personal experiences, through active effort, builds the main in his mind and creates his own representation. On the other hand, external representations are visualizations of mental conceptions through graphic tools. Thus, external representations include speech, symbols, images, tables, diagrams, graphs, and physical models. It is evident that the linear equations offer for students with specific learning difficulties an appropriate field for the creation and development of learning mathematical activities with the use of representations. The type and functions of these activities significantly which depend on the requirements of the mathematical concept being taught, significantly improve the comprehension ability of students. Another function of representation is to limit the conclusions it can draw about the meaning it represents. The text allows for vague information, while a diagram or graph gives more specific information. Regarding the cognitive goals containing in the teaching using external representations, students it is certain that students would face issues when they are asked to interact with a representation for the first time. Students need to understand the form of representation, that is the way in which a representation presents information. Students need to understand the relationship between representation and the represented subject area. Students may be asked to choose the appropriate representation, and in a few cases, students may be able to construct the appropriate representation. In some cases, they find it easier to construct a representation than to interpret an existing one. It should be stressed that when creating an activity for the purpose of teaching a mathematical concept, the teacher could choose some external representation so that the student, based on his previous knowledge, personal capacities according to his specific learning difficulties and experiences, as well as the wider socio-cultural context, to create his own internal representations. The variety of external representations helps the students to create respectively a variety of internal representation and the way of interaction of the external representations to finally reach the comprehension of the subject area. In conclusion, mathematics is very important. It's very important science and academic study in schools. Through the knowledge of mathematics, students acquire skills and competencies for their present and future lives as decision making, problem solving, and rational thinking. Linear equations are part of mathematics that is based on representations and thus argues the students to practice their minds in order to understand the meanings, the correlations, and the interactions among the parts of the equation. Students with specific learning difficulties, facing difficulties in basic reading, writing, or mathematical concepts and matters could benefit from the dynamics of mathematics and linear equations in order to overcome their difficulties, to correspond to the demands of the school, to improve their school performance, and to become activated as students and future citizens in an inclusive way. Thank you for your time and consideration.